Hi Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session today. It's good to have you here. Thanks for the weather reports. Today I think it's colder in Nashville than it is here. It was 28 when I got up, I think. It is now, oh my goodness. That doesn't seem right. It says 53, but I don't think that's right. Fahrenheit, by the way. In any case, hope you're doing well. Mark, good to see you here today from South Texas, sunny but chilly. We are hoping for cooler weather here. We did have our first ski day on Friday, but we could certainly use colder weather and more moisture. So for those in the Pacific Northwest, I'm looking at you, Steve, from rainy gray Victoria, British Columbia. We would love it if you could send some of that moisture this way. We'll put it to use, I promise. Right. Hi, Matt. It's good to hear from you today. Good to have you here. And then Rag and Bone Puppet Theater. Great to have you here as well. I'm operating solo, as you can see. Danny has another commitment she had to go to. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. I'm going to do my best to switch effectively. Let's see, that'll be the super source. There we go. Today we're going to do a little bit of beta testing. So thanks for coming along for the beta testing ride here. We have a Tascam FR-AV4, and let's just show you that here. We have that all set up and ready to go here. I've got a beta firmware running on here that includes the new Automix feature that Tascam's working on. So we'll come back to that in just a minute here. This is a workshop, of course, which goes along with our courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. And as I mentioned before, Tascam sent over this beta firmware. It was one of the things that I talked with them when they sent over an engineering copy of the FR-AV4 before they released it when I was under embargo. They asked for feedback. My primary feedback was I would love to see an Automix feature. In fact, all of the other major audio recorders in this price range offer Automix of some form, either included as in the Zoom F6 and the Zoom F8N Pro, or it's an add-on, a plug-in that you can get for the Mix Pre series. So they took that feedback seriously. Now they have a version of it in beta firmware, so we're going to go ahead and test that. And then we do have a question that was submitted ahead of time. In fact, let's go to that question now. It is not related to the Tascam, but I want to jump on this right away. This is from Javier. We've been running into issues with our wireless handheld microphone system cutting out. So Javier is working in a house of worship. They've attached some images. I didn't see the images. We use a Shure BLX88 dual transmitter and receiver and one Sennheiser XS wireless. If you could provide insight as to the cause of the dropouts and how to troubleshoot it, that would be a blessing. Well, let me go back and pull up that email and see if I can find those images here really quickly. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Let's see, that's going to be under live stream topics from Javier. Let's see if I can show these images here. Okay, switching over to the Mac so that we can show you what we have here. So Javier has used this. Looks like the BLX receiver, dual channel receiver. It looks like a relatively small sanctuary. I didn't get the full picture of that, but okay, you've got the receiver sitting up on kind of a countertop above the mixer, it looks like there. The antennas are kind of at least I see one antenna kind of a 45-degree angle. And then here's the XS receiver. Also the antenna at kind of a 45-degree angle. And then your mixer's a Yamaha MG12XU. Okay, great. That should be fine. Looks like the handheld transmitters here. Okay, cool. Javier, thank you for sharing the details there. Well, dropouts, when the audio cuts out, typically that's because the signal can't make it from the transmitter to the receiver, and that can happen for two reasons. Some sort of barrier, well, two main reasons. Some sort of barrier, kind of the most obvious ones. And then Another one is some sort of interference, something else operating or kind of interfering at that same frequency that you're transmitting at. So with the XS wireless, I think XS, if I remember right, that's Sennheiser's 2.4 gigahertz system. XS wireless, let's just take a look here. Let's see, feedback rejection, convenient features, one button scanning, streamlined receiver, 10 channels simultaneously. Oh, good grief. I wish it was... Okay, let's go straight to the source. Sennheiser. Here we go. Going to switch to the Mac. Yeah, I'm in... Oh, there we go. We're in the United States. Okay, great. All right, XS wireless. Easy to use all-in-one wireless system with more flexibility. Designed for the artist presenter wants to fully concentrate on their talent and technique and not on their microphone equipment. Just turn on our system and the automatic frequency management does the rest to set you up in no time. I'm not... Details, come on, people. Is it 2.4 gigahertz? I'm 90% sure it is. Or possibly they did some at, what, like 1900 megahertz? Pretty sure. So that's a 2.4 system. You don't have the option on that one to switch to a different frequency. So in that case, that's a challenge in a sanctuary where you've got a bunch of people all with their mobile phones, all probably with their Wi-Fi turned on, plus whatever other Wi-Fi you have running in the sanctuary itself. There is a good chance for interference. The 2.4 gigahertz band is relatively narrow, and you generally can't run that many channels at the same time. So every single phone is using one of, a little bit of that slice and the wireless system. So that could be the problem with the XS system there. That's a guess. Also, you'll want to keep those antennas, the receiver antennas, up as high as possible. You can, it looks like on both of those systems, on the receivers, you could use an external antenna for those. So you could use something like a shark fin, which is directional, and you could aim that at the stage so that you could essentially extend your range a little bit. So that is the next thing. Christopher asks, let's see. Matt's on the same exact kind of mindset as me. I would first look into improving the antenna, but I'm not sure that's an option. Yeah, so that's it. On the XS system, that's not an option. On the BLX system, that could be. Yeah, Christopher asks, what frequency band is the BLX? What TV channels are in the area? Have you done a fresh group scan to look for clean channels? All good advice. I completely agree. You need to do a frequency scan and kind of get the understanding of the lay of the land. What other TV channels are in the area that they're broadcasting at, and what other kind of stuff may be there as well. All right. This is a good one too from Mark. First thing I would check is how the presenter is handling the mic. So often people will hold the mic body at the bottom, covering the antenna with their hand. So yeah, make sure that they're holding the microphone up like this and not down at the bottom where the antenna is typically located. So you don't want their hand over the antenna. They should be holding it up closer to the microphone capsule itself. That's a good piece of advice as well. Yes, Alexander, this is also great advice. Wireless systems usually benefit from line of sight and can sometimes be affected when there are hundreds of bodies between the transmitter and receiver, as in lecture hall situations. Again, antennas up higher. Even if you can't go down the route of getting an external antenna for the BLX system, getting those antennas up higher so that there are no people or other barriers in between the transmitter and the receiver antenna itself. So those are all things you can do. Here's another one that is also great advice. Matt Ruff says you could run a snake into the front side of the stage and place the receivers on the side of the stage so that the receivers are up on stage near the presenters. Also, good advice, you're just reducing the distance and the potential number of barriers between the transmitter and receivers. So I didn't even have to say anything. You all got it covered. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that very much. All right. And Diesel 10, thanks for answering my wireless microphone question. The pleasure is all of ours. The community is here to help each other out, so thanks for that. All right, some questions. Thank you for the question, Javier. Appreciate that. Let's go to the question. We have a couple of items here in the chat. Let me go back to my main camera here, just clean, tidy things up here. Will the Automix come with a free firmware, or is it a paid upgrade? They haven't well, when I asked, they said it would be a firmware upgrade. So that would indicate to me that it's probably not a paid upgrade. I don't know for certain, but my sense is it's probably going to be a free firmware upgrade. Fingers crossed, but I don't officially know the answer to that question. Another question from Christopher, any idea if Automix will come to the FR-AV2 as well? I don't have any idea on that. Yeah, not sure. They have not said anything about that. But I can ask, and I will do. All right, let's see here. Matt, I've had a few year experience dealing with things, dealing with problems and solving them. Indeed, understand. All right, he's getting ready for church right now, and we'll look into that this week. Great. I hope that helps you and you're able to get that problem solved. All right, let's take a look at the FR-AV4 and the firmware. So I'm going to switch to my overhead camera here, and let's just take a look at what we've got. So coming into the menu here, I'm going to pop on over to, let's see, menus have changed a little bit, and I'm in a weird angle, so give me just a second here to kind of reorient myself. And I probably need to turn it. Apologies for that. Okay, so information, let's just see where we're at. System, we're on firmware 81.10 build 67. Just for reference. So this is going to change. This is a beta firmware, just so that you're aware. Don't, things can change and might possibly do. So let's hop out of the menus. Here I have microphone number 2. This is a Shure KSM8, so I have this connected to channel 2 here, and we can gain it so that we're getting a healthy signal, but not clipping, somewhere around there. Checking 1, 2, 3, good. And then I have microphone number 2, or well, it's actually on channel 1 here. Let me gain this up a little bit. This is a Shure SM58. Coming into channel number 1, and that's what we have set up here. So now ideally, if I come back out to the main camera here, a couple of things. So I think the main use case in my mind for Automix is podcasts, and number 2, panel discussions or multiple person audio recordings. Not so much for narrative work. Sometimes people ask that, and the trick is with narrative work, if you've got people laved up and you're booming them, Automix isn't necessarily, you can try it, but it's not really made for those situations because it's not going to be able to make a decision. Well, generally it's not going to make a decision between which mic to use, the boom mic versus the lav mic for any individual, and things are going to be out of phase. Automix doesn't fix phase issues directly. Kind of indirectly, but it does potentially. But in any case, I'm talking as if I'm talking to you on this, and I should be talking into this. Apologies for that. So, in light of that use case, usually, if I've got 2 people in a relatively small space, I'm going to turn to dynamic microphones first. It's usually the way I approach things. And what that does is Dynamic microphones in and of themselves are not better at managing room noise or rejecting reflections or anything like that, except that they tend to require a lot more gain, and you tend to have to work up closer on them to get a good strong signal. So the fact that people are working up closer to them improves the signal to noise ratio. So I'm going to get more voice and less of the other stuff around me. Also, another thing that I typically do is that when I do have multiple people in the same space, I'll generally use the 3-to-1 rule. So generally I want the space between the microphones to be at least 3 times the distance from the person's mouth to the microphone. So, try to space them apart as much as possible. Also use the polar patterns to help to create rejection. So if you can have 2 people sitting across from each other, if that works. If you're doing visuals as well, you can have to roll with both of them. But in other words, if you can't have them sitting across from each other, that's okay. But try to space them apart as much. And the reason for that, and the problem with these multi-recording or recording multiple people in the same space, is that when I talk into my microphone, my voice is also being picked up in this microphone to a lesser degree, but also still being picked up here. And not only does that sound it starts to sound weird because my mouth is closer to my microphone than it is to this microphone. There is a fairly significant chance that the audio that comes into this microphone, because it has to travel a little bit of a distance, will be out of phase with the sound that's coming into my microphone. Therefore, the fact that my voice is being picked up on this channel and on this channel, but slightly out of phase at a lower level, will create comb filtering, which does not sound good. So the idea with Automix is that when I'm talking into my microphone here, it'll detect that and it will essentially pull my fader for my microphone up, and it will reduce the fader for the other microphones in the space. That's the idea, generally. And there are lots of different algorithms to get to that general idea, but that's the general idea. Now, there's Dugan Automix, which some people consider the best Automix algorithm on the market, and it is very good. There is Sound Devices Mix Assist, which uses a different algorithm. But what those algorithms do to some extent is they share the overall system gain amongst microphones. So the idea is that you should never hear like a massive dropout of sound. So it shouldn't sound obviously processed, especially the Dugan system does a really good job at that. Automix does a fairly decent job at that. But some of the others aren't nearly as aggressive. So the Zoom F6 and F8N Pro also have an Automix built into them. They are completely transparent, or opaque, I should say. They don't give you any settings. It's either on or off, and they don't really tell you how it works. So, and I've also found that it's not quite as effective. It's not as aggressive, so it doesn't fix the typical problems you run into when you have multiple people recording in a small space near each other. So anyway, so those are all the different things. Let's take a look and see. Let's see how Tascam has addressed that. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. We'll come back to these in just a moment here. All good questions, but we'll come back to those. All right, let's take a peek. If I come into the menu here, and again, I'm going to have to turn it toward me a little bit. Apologies for that. Whoops, headphone volume. Okay, so here's our Automix item in the menu here. And it looks like we can turn all of them on. Oh, interesting. So you can already see it doing the gain sharing. This is me talking into input number 1. Now I'm talking into input number 2. Ooh, this looks actually pretty interesting. So I'm talking again into input number 1 again. Cool. It looks like there is also... No, I don't know how this works, but it looks like there's a fader where you can essentially give, it looks like priority, essentially. Maybe that's it. Let's just leave them at 0 for now. Let's just do our first little test here. So I'm going to pop back out of the menu. Okay, you can see how it's showing that I'm talking into input number 1 right now. Now I'm talking into input number 2, and it's indicating that here. And you can see the level on the first microphone is much lower. Now I'm talking into input number 1. It looks like it is gain sharing across them in some fashion, but what really will tell the story is when we listen to it, what it sounds like when we listen to it. So what I'm doing here is I have these mics in pretty close proximity. They're within about, I would say, 12 to 18 inches of each other when I'm talking into them alternatively. So let's switch to mic number 2. Now I'm talking into mic number 2. And you could see mic number 1 actually is switched back to mic 1 as priority when I set it down. Obviously, we wouldn't do that in a real world scenario. I'd have these on stands so that the people wouldn't be able to mess with them. But let's go ahead and make a recording. And, oh, the card's protected. Let me fix that. Okay, so to fix that, I'll come into the back here. Pull the card and unprotect it. Put it back in. Okay, here we are again. Let's see how this goes now. Now I'm talking into input number 1. Why does it say protected? I know for certain I just unprotected that, so let's see what's going on. Oh. What is going on? I think we need a new card. Give me just a moment here. Let's go back to our main camera here. SD card failure. That is so bizarre. The little switch for protecting the card is gone. Okay, 1 second. Oh, I may have to format. Let's see if I've got another one handy here. The joys of SD cards. Pulling one from my Zoom F6. Not easy to get SD cards out of a Zoom F6, FYI. Okay. We have a new card. It is not write protected. Popping it in. We'll go back to our overhead camera here. I know it's a little out of focus when it's in that position, but okay, what does it say here? It's telling us that file not found, make the system file okay. Let's actually format this before we jump in and do anything. Here are the SD cards. Let's format, do a quick format. Okay, here we go. Let's see if this works now. Okay, we are recording. Now I'm talking into input number 1, and you can see it's selected input number 1 as our kind of primary here. Now I'm going to switch over to mic number 2. Now I'm talking into mic number 2 over here, checking our levels here, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to switch back to mic number 1. Here's mic number 1. What happens if people talk into both of them at the same time, and then back into input number 1 primarily? And then let's go ahead and talk into input number 2. Checkity check, check, 1, 2, and then person number 1 has something really important to say, and they kind of talk over person 2, and then they kind of dominate. and they take the floor as it, so to speak. And let's go ahead and stop the recording here. Okay, there is our recording. Now, I need to get that onto our computer so we can have a look at that. Two options, USB, which I'm powering this device with a USB battery bank at the moment. Okay, we could pull the plug on that and actually plug and transfer via USB to the computer. Let's do that. So pull that out, plug that into the computer here without whacking the microphone, hopefully. Okay. Now we are plugged into the computer, so I'll come in here. We can, I believe it's in here. We make this an SD card reader. Cool. Then we can switch over to the Mac. There we go. Pull this up here. Desktop. There we go. And we will go find the FR-AV4 sound. Okay. What have we got going here? Why is it in that format? Here we go. Okay. That is our waveform audio. Let's pull that, drop that on our desktop. Not the fastest card reader, but there we go. Okay. We'll open up Resolve and we'll bring that audio file right in here. Let's just create a new project. This is the Automix test. To our media. We'll just go to our desktop and drag that right in here. Oh, whoa, okay, that's cool. No problem there. All right, what have we got here? Looks like we have this looks like the ISOs, and then we have the mix. Interesting. Okay. Let's pull that in here. Okay, so this and this, I know we can get rid of. Let's unlink them. Because that's channel strain 4. We don't need that. This looks like the mix. And this looks like the ISOs. They got that backwards. So I have another piece of feedback is put the mix first in the polywave file. This is kind of backwards here. So let's go ahead and get rid of the empty tracks. So I'm going to guess this is mix left, it looks like, and this one is mix right. Mix right. This will be mic 1, mic 2. Okay, let's go ahead and mute the ISOs for now. Let's also just check the levels on this here. Clip operations, analyze audio levels, just to see where we're at, -19. So these are a little hot. I am going to reduce these to -26 for the left and -26 for the right, which should sum to -23 LUFS. So I want to go to clip operations, normalize. Let's go, I don't want sample peak, I want 1770-4, and I want -26. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing here, clip operations, normalize, -26. Okay, cool. So now when we play this back, let's see what we've got here. I'll go home, I will select a range, and we'll put it on repeat. Here we go. Okay, we are recording. I'm talking into input number 1, and you can see it's selected input number 1 as our kind of One other thing I need to do first is I want to pan these left and right. So the left mix is on this channel here, so I'm going to come into the panner. I'm going to pan that left, pan this right. Not that it makes a difference necessarily in this case because we were just doing mono recordings, but just so that we get the full minus 23 LUFS. Okay, back to playing. Primary here. Now I'm going to switch over to mic number 2. Now I'm talking into mic number 2 over here, checking our levels here, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to switch back to mic number 1. Here's mic number 1. What happens if people talk into both of them at the same time, and then back into input number 1 primarily. And then let's go ahead and talk into input number 2. Checkity check check 1 2, and then person number 1 has something really important to say, and they kind of talk over person 2, and then they kind of dominate, and they take the floor as it, so to speak. And let's go ahead and stop the recording here. Okay, let's take a closer look at that. But overall, it's sounding pretty decent, I would say. Whoops, not that I need. Here we go. You know what? It's not so much those that I need to pan. Let's go look. Okay, actually, what I'm going to do, let's go listen now to the ISOs instead of the auto mix. So the auto mix should just be affecting the mix tracks. Let's go ahead and listen to this and see how this sounds. Okay, we are recording. I'm talking into input number 1, and you can see it's selected input number 1 as our kind of primary here. Sorry, really loud. Let's take care of that. Clip ops, normalize, minus 26. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to switch over to mic number 2. Now I'm talking into mic number 2 over here, checking our levels here, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to switch back to mic number 1. Here's mic number 1. What happens if people talk into both of them at the same time, and then back into input number 1 primarily. And then let's go ahead and talk into input number 2. Checkity check check 1 2, and then person number 1 has something really important to say, and they kind of talk over person 2, and then they kind of dominate, and they take the floor as it, so to speak. And let's go ahead and stop the recording here. Okay, let's go to the chat. Sorry, the chat was covering the screen. Let's talk for a minute. I want let's go back here and see what we've got in the chat here. Assuming you're allowed to say, is there anything in addition to Automix in the new firmware? Not that they didn't say there was, and I haven't seen anything different, Christopher. They didn't say anything. They didn't say don't talk about it, but Tascam is quite not often spend devices, new firmware. That's my experience. In other words, I think you're saying they don't usually charge for firmware updates. Have they said what type of Automix algorithm they're using? Gain sharing, just gating, etc. They haven't said, but there is evidently somewhere in the algorithm a priority. I don't know if it's just the faders that we saw, so I'll have to ask some questions about that. I didn't see a separate thing here. Can I announce later a trick to phasing and comp filtering at a later point to explain? I think you should have a live stream and you should teach us these things. Yes, please. Mix Assist is not gain sharing. It's much closer to Shure's IntelliMix. It's an advanced gating engine. Dugan, Allen and Heath automatic mic mixer in one of the modes are proper gain sharing. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's, yeah, technically you are absolutely right, Christopher. All right. That channel response looks more like gating than gain sharing. The second hand, the second channel wouldn't go to 0 in gain sharing algorithm. Okay, let's just pop out of here just so, I'm gonna go back to the overhead camera, just so I can show you what Christopher's talking about here. So we need to first eject that from the Mac so that we don't cause any complaints or problems. Pop out. What Christopher is talking about here is if we come back, not there, if we come into the menu and we go into the Mix Assist here. So I'm talking into number 1, and you can see essentially the levels for number 2 almost disappear. So they're probably, while I'm talking into input 1, it's gating the other channels. When I stop talking, and you're just getting the room tone, and you can see that it essentially ungates everything, it looks like. Not entirely. So it might be acting a little bit more like Mix Assist, and what Mix Assist is doing is it's attenuating the non-active mics by a certain amount, and when none of them are considered the active mic, I think it has another way it handles that where it reduces all of them by a little bit. It is gating, but anyway, that is the nuances here. I don't know exactly what this is doing, but I think, Christopher, you're probably right. Well, in the second view, there is more evidence of gain sharing. I don't know. Tell me in the chat what I'm interested in. How did it sound? Were you able to tell the difference between the ISO channels and the auto mixed? And the problem is I may have been using the wrong mics for this demonstration, so we may pull out some condenser mics to see how that does. SD cards on the Tascam really don't like your live streams. Yeah, the SD cards are being truculent for certain. I will say that this particular SD card is very old. I think this one's probably 10 years old, so yeah. So to be fair. Cue the Jeopardy music. Thank you, Mark. It looks like mostly gain sharing, but there was a bit there where you were on mic 2 that mic 1 was fully down, which gain sharing wouldn't do. But this is also beta, so... Christopher, could you use the FR-AV4 as a USB sound card and have the Automix feed into the computer via USB audio? I have not tested that yet. But the question is whether or not, let's go back to the overhead here. I'm going to have to turn this toward me. I'll turn it back up in just a moment here. If we come into our outputs, it looks like it's a stereo output there. What about the USB output? That's the question. So if I come into... I assume that the USB output is outputting both ISO and mix. Well, we may have to actually look on the Mac to see that. So let's go back to the Mac. And let's go to Tascam FR-AV4 manual. This is probably it here, hopefully. Okay. Output. Just doing a search here. How about USB? Okay, audio channel assignments. These are the inputs here. So USB 1 and 2 is a stereo mix from the computer. USB 3, 4 are inputs 1 and 2, and 5 and 6 are 3 and 4. I'm trying to wait a minute. So it does look like it's sending a stereo mix to the computer. Set the audio input device FR-AV4 on the computer. Set this unit and the computer to use the same bit depths and sampling frequencies. Turn on CH enable for the channels to be used as inputs to the computer. Where is CH enable? That is in the input. So if we go back to the overhead here, if I come out of the menu, I think that's a setting per channel. Is it? No. Where is that setting? That's the big question. It's under record enable. So if I come into input 1, pulling the USB card from the computer for the moment, what is going on? Okay, we are not recording. CH enable is right here. For whatever reason, it is currently grayed out. Is that because maybe in Automix mode, it only sends the stereo mix? Not sure. We'll have to experiment with that a little bit more. Christopher, good question. Something for me to take a look at it. Can it mix just a mono channel? What would that look like? What do you mean by that, Christopher? Please. Can you add a phase visualization, please? Is there one built into DaVinci Resolve? Let's take a look. Back to the Mac. Back to Resolve. Make our channels smaller again. Let's see here. Is there a visualization on the output bus? So here's a phase meter. Okay, so let's play the, let's play again and see what's happening here. And here we go. I'm talking into input number 1, and you can see it's selected input number 1. Stand by, we need to unpan. Actually, it shouldn't matter because we didn't pan these and these are not panned. So panning is irrelevant here. 1 is our kind of primary here. Now I'm going to switch over to mic number 2. Now I'm talking into mic number 2 over here, checking our levels here, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to switch back to mic number 1. Here's mic number 1. What happens if people... I think what we're seeing here is the asymmetry of the waveforms that were recorded. Let's go over to the mix and let's unpan these. Go to the center. Center. Now we're on the mix. Let's hear what that sounds like and see what the meter does. We'll talk into both of them at the same time and then back into input number 1 primarily. I think, yeah, this is... I don't know what I would expect to see here. I don't know what I would expect to see here with this particular meter, and maybe this is not the kind of meter you're referring to. Just wondering about handling noise here. There's handling noise, no question. Delayed due, evidently. I think I'm way behind. I apologize. I don't understand the context of some of these comments. Apologies here. We did post in Discord some information about Absynth, and because of the ability of direct filtering, we use it as an audio input interface, not as a synth for sound design because of the outstanding. Okay, I'll have to go take a look at that. Christopher says, for the Automix, can it Automix down to a single mono channel instead of the mirrored stereo? Yeah, I didn't see a setting for that. So I think it's just stereo. And then presumably in post or live, you would just take one of the channels if you just wanted a mono. Example for a panel discussion, it's a bunch of mono mics and you want a mono mix output from it. Yeah. Yeah, I think you just take one of the channels on your mixing board to make it a mono mix if you're doing it live, or if you're doing it in post, you could just take back to the Mac here. You could take just one of these channels. I think you're going to see the same result on 1 versus 2, because if they're pan center, the ISOs, the two mixed tracks should be identical. And then let's go ahead and talk into, well, I heard a little something there. Some gating primarily. And then let's go ahead and talk. Did you hear that? Is that just me? Into input number 2, checkity check check 1 2, and then person number 1 has something really important to say, and they kind of talk over person 2, and then they kind of dominate, and they take the floor as it, so to speak. And let's go ahead and stop the recording here. Yeah, so I think in the end what's happening is that if they're not panned, I think presumably those two left and right mix should be the exact same thing. Implemented filters and visualization, we pass all synth and use it as effect, so you can compensate phasing and comb complete. Some sound designs use it also just for multi-output to use it as a mono or 7.1 or multi-channel. We have the waveform in the Evo. I apologize. I think I'm having some, not quite following everything here, but it sounds like you're using a plugin that does a lot of the things that Christopher was asking. Well, it can sum it down to mono for you, and you're using this particular synth that does, you turn off the synth and you're just using the filters and visualization. So I'll take a look at that. Thanks for that. Okay. Can you pull the left and right mix into isotope and see if they null when subtracted? Are they really just the same mono mix doubled into stereo? Okay, we can do that. Except, can we? Well, what we can do is we can just do that. We should be able to do that right here. I should just be able to invert the phase on one of the channels, correct? And we should hear nothing. Let's see what we get. So, going back to the Mac, I should be able to take, let's take mix left right here. I will come into the path settings here and I will invert the phase. Now when I play this back, wait a minute, no, that's not going to work. Yes, mix left it should, because they're both pan center. So let's see what it sounds like now. Okay, we could tell from sound and from sight, they do appear to be nulling each other out. So I inverted the phase on mix left. You could see the meters for both left and right, but there was nothing on the mix bus on the meters, and we couldn't hear anything. So it does appear, Christopher, to be, they do appear to be nulling out. So I'm going to go ahead and come back into the path settings and undo the invert phase. And now when I play, it should play fine. To mic number 2 over here, checking our levels here, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to switch back to mic. Yeah, so yay, we were able to answer a question. Thanks for the question, Christopher. Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's hook up some condenser microphones and see if that makes a difference. The trick with condenser microphones is that they typically You wouldn't typically work as close to them, and so your signal to noise ratio is not as good. So let's plug a couple of those in and see what happens. So thank you to the Shure Dynamic microphones. Let's get some condensers here. First, we'll get the MKH50, I believe this one is. Yep, this is the MKH50. And just because it happens to be right here, here's the Sennheiser MKH416. All right. We'll plug both of those in, and then I'm going to go to the overhead camera here. Okay, first thing I need to do is, let's see here. First thing I need to do is enable phantom power on both channels here. There's that channel 1 and on channel 2. Whoops. Okay, channel number 1 appears to be the MKH416, and I will back off a little bit. This is the MKH416 on channel 1. And this is the MKH50 on channel 2. Checking our levels here, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Are those? I need my glasses. 1 second. Apologies for the bump there on the camera. We're in some tight quarters here. Okay, glasses will help me see what is going on. Okay, 48, that's just the phantom power. I thought maybe those channels were muted, but they are not. And the Automix appears to be working. Okay, let's make another recording here. All right, first I'm talking into the Sennheiser MKH416 right now, and that's what this sounds like. And then I will switch over, and now I'm talking into the MKH50. And each time I'm about 12 inches away when I'm talking into them. Now I'm talking into the 416, again about 12 inches away. So this is the MKH416 on channel number 1. Now I'm on the MKH50 on channel number 2. We may be gained differently. Just a second here. Just giving the 416 a little bit more gain. Well, that's too much. Little less gain. There we go. Even that's a little much. This is the 4. Oh, I was too close. That was my problem. This is the MKH416 on channel 1. And this is the MKH50 on channel number 2. Switching back and forth. Now I have both of them. This is both channels, the equidistant from both of them. And now I'm on the 416 on channel number 1. Okay, we're stopping the recording there. Let's go ahead and get that over into the computer. Switch back over. I'm going to pull the card this time. All right. Pop this into the computer. At an awkward angle. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete. Shoot, there we go. Shoot, there we go. Okay. Delete. We'll delete this other file. Okay, now switching to the Mac so you can see what I'm doing here. Let's get rid of that one so we don't confuse ourselves. Let's go over here. Let's go here. Let's go here. All right, this is the one I believe we want. Yep. Whoa, what's going on here? I want my desktop. Yeah, desktop. There we go. Okay. Desktop. Drop that there. Brilliant. Oh. Let's bring that here. Into here. Just to be safe, let's get rid of timeline 1. I want to create a new timeline. Okay, we're going to unlink these. We're going to get rid of these two. We're going to delete the empty tracks. This is the mix down here. These are the ISOs up here. Let's listen to the ISOs first. And while we're doing that, just out of pure curiosity, let's go grab that phase meter. Just for grins and giggles. Let's zoom this. Let's go and let's normalize these. Can you normalize 2 tracks at the same time? Whoa. Has to think hard about that. I would not have expected this to take this long on a Mac Studio with the M4 Max in it. So that's weird. Let's see what it does. We're experimenting with several things today, not only Automix, but also with DaVinci Resolve. That something's wrong. Back to the Mac. Oh my goodness. Now it's normalizing cancel. We'll just do one at a time. Fine. Fine, you make us do the work. That's just fine. Why is it so slow? Okay, so let's do this. Let's save our project. Let's quit. Let's come back into Resolve. Back into our Automix test. Let's right click, clip ops, normalize, -26. Boom. Clip ops, normalize, -26. Boom. I don't know what was going on. This looks like a bug to me. Okay, let's listen to these and see what we hear. Here we go. All right, first I'm talking into the Sennheiser MKH416 right now. Okay, this is good. Did you hear that? So again, we're listening to the isolated channels. This is not auto-mixed. Did you hear the phase effect? Listen carefully again. And that's what this sounds like. And then I will switch over, and now I'm talking into the MKH50. And each time I'm about 12 inches away when I'm talking into them. Now I'm talking into the 416, again about 12 inches away. So this is the MKH416 on channel number 1. Now I'm on the MKH50 on channel number 2. We may be gained differently. Just a second here. Just giving the 416 a little bit more gain. Well, that's too much. Little less gain. There we go. Even that's a little much. This is the oh, I was too close. That was my problem. This is the MKH416 on channel 1. And this is the MKH50 on channel number 2. Okay, so we're definitely getting some comb filtering there. If I were to do the same thing that we did before, and I could tell for sure if I come in, oh no, that's not a valid test, but let's listen to the auto-mixed version and see if that sounds better. And here we go. All right, first I'm talking into the Sennheiser MKH416 right now, and that's what this sounds like. And then I will switch over, and now I'm talking into the MKH50. And each time I'm about 12 inches away when I'm talking into them. Now I'm talking into the 416, again about 12 inches away. So this is the MKH416 on channel number 1. Now I'm on the MKH50 on channel number 2. We may be gained differently. Just a second here. Okay, that is the effect of the Automix. You should be able to hear a difference there, hopefully, and what you can reasonably expect with the Tascam FR-AV4's Automix feature at its default settings. All we did was turn it on for channels 1 and 2, period. that actually makes a difference. In fact, I feel like it seems like it's actually doing more than the Zoom Automix does. It's not doing quite as much necessarily. Hard to say with the Mix Pre. I need to do a formal test, but that's going pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with that. All right, let's see what people have to say here. Oh, gee, Quasi. Glad Curtis has just a few expensive condensers laying around. Yeah, the laying around, it's on these particular mics are mics that I use more often, and well, the 416 not so much. The 50 I use all the time. The mics that I use most often are actually on shelves at the bottom of my rack here. So they're not to answer. Well, then Matt's kind of joking around with OG Quasi saying, what, you don't have a mic drawer? So mine's not a drawer. This is not a drawer. I have a set of drawers over there that have most of the rest of my mics. Unless they come in a large case, in which case they're also in the rack, just where I have room for them. In any case, Matt, yeah, I think we found a bug there or something that Fairlight just isn't ready to do. All right, well, friends and fellow Soundies, thank you for joining us today. It was fun to have you along for a little bit of beta testing. My take on the Tascam Automix so far, I think it would save potentially a lot of one of two things. For those that don't understand, they're getting started in audio. Let's put it that way. Getting started in audio, they are going to do a podcast. They want it to sound better than just using a Focusrite 2i2 or, a larger one with more inputs, and they have multiple people recording in the same space, especially if they're using condenser microphones, but even with dynamic microphones potentially. And they want their podcast to sound better, and they don't want to necessarily do, or they don't even know how to do a proper mix in post. Coming in and railroading, cutting out the silent portions on both of the tracks and kind of doing the crossfades and making it sound much more professional, much cleaner, and much easier to listen to, then I would say the Tascam FR-AV4 Automix achieves that goal. So far in this testing, it looks like it does a pretty nice job at that. All right. All right. All right, Steve says, another great session. Curtis will send some of the PNW Pacific Northwest atmospheric river rain over your way. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Steve. We have some people talking here about microphone drawers. Not yet. Matt's down to one drawer now that he's retired. I still have a lot of drawers, mainly because I review microphones. But we could, and at some point we can talk about what the microphones would be that I would keep if I did have to pare down the kit substantially. All right, with that, get out there and make some great sound this week. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.